Welcome to the Social Innovator Dialogues, and it's great to see so many of you here tonight. My name is Brenton Caffin, and on behalf of the organising partners, the Australian Social Innovation Exchange, the Centre for Social Impact, and the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, I'd like to thank you for joining us here today. We'd like to acknowledge the land we meet on this evening is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. I'd also like to extend our thanks to our sponsors, the Macquarie Group Foundation, Cisco, the Victorian Public Service Innovation Action Plan, and RIOS, without whose support this tour would not have been possible. Social Innovator Dialogues brings internationally renowned leaders in social innovation together with local change makers. The dialogues aim to challenge us to think differently about the big issues affecting our nations and communities, and to find practical ways to integrate innovative approaches into our responses to unmet social needs. And we're delighted to begin this series by welcoming Ezio Manzini to Australia. Ezio is one of the world's leading thinkers on design for social innovation and sustainability. He's a designer, an engineer, an architect, an educator and author, and polymath, and amazing after 24 hours of constant flying to actually still be performing. He's Professor of Design at the Politecnico di Milano, Honorary Doctor at the New School of New York, at the Goldsmiths College of London, and Honorary Professor at the Glasgow School of Art. Presently, his main interests are towards design for social innovation, and he's promoter and coordinator of the DASIS Network, an international network on design for social innovation and sustainability. His works are focused on strategic design, service design, and design for sustainability and social innovation in everyday life. This evening, Ezio will be talking to us about how an emerging scenario can lead us towards a sustainable society. Could I please ask you to welcome Ezio to the lectern?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to be here to listen to me. I've seen some glasses of wine circulating. This is very good, so you will be more positive and maybe more smooth against my mistakes. My English is never very good. I speak Globish, that is a kind of English that everybody that is not Australian or American or English normally speak. But after 24 hours of fly, maybe my Globish is even worse than normally. But with a little bit of wine, a little bit of creativity, I hope that we will intend ourselves. Well, before entering in what is the specific content of my conversation, I want to say some introductory note. It happened to me to deal about sustainability, and afterward, as you know, I'm designer, a kind of design for sustainability since 25 years or something like this. And I remember that for many years, until a few years ago, when we spoke in general about a sustainable society, we always said, well, we don't have an idea of how a sustainable society could be. We have a lot of idea of what does not work in our society, but if we project in the future, we can have some wishes, we can have some hopeful thinking, but at the moment we said nobody can really say how a sustainable society could be. Well, in the last decade, in my view, a lot of things changed, and something that in the past was seen as the future is more or less now. First, because nowadays everybody recognizes that there is a problem, and more or less everybody recognizes that we have to move to some sustainable society, sustainable economy, and so on. So this is really a big change. Today, this rhetoric that we use is not so much to explain that there is a problem and we need to do something else, but more what we have to do, facing people that more or less agree that something has to happen. At the same time, after 25 years of experience, I think, I'm not the only one, but somebody think that we start to have some ideas about how a sustainable society could be. and not only as a should be for some ethical reason, but as it could be because there are some strong driver that bring us in that direction, or that could bring us in that direction. So this was the introduction to say that choosing in between what could be the focus of a conference like this, I choose to try to present you a scenario that could indicate some guidelines of a possible sustainable society. What, in my view, and the view of who share my same idea, could be a sustainable society. So I am sure that the individual information that I will give you will not be so new. But maybe what could be new is the way to put them together and to try to discuss, to share with you the fact if you take different pieces that we can read on the newspaper every day and you put them together, well, maybe something starts to appear of how a sustainable society could be like. First of all, it should work, but it do not work. It's my fault. And I will start discussing, well, this is the beginning of the story, so can you go back? Yeah. This is a very, so look at this, please. So that one was a very simple story. I think that more or less was clear. And it's a story that shows that you can do something for sustainability that is not so complicated, is not so heroic, is not so difficult, but in some way it's a new idea. In some way it's not the way of living that has been the mainstream and is the mainstream also today. I like to start with this short presentation because I'd like to say that what we are talking now is not necessarily something extreme. And it's something that could be a pleasure. Of course, to move in this direction, you have to have had some transformation and change a little bit what you think are the qualities of the life. And I will try to enter in a little bit in this notion of a kind of change in the priority of what you think to be the well-being before moving to the scenario. That one, in a technical term, was an example of community-supported agriculture. Here, it's a list, I do not make the presentation of each one of them, of social innovation ideas that appeared in the last 10 years or 20 years. And the list can continue. It's simply, I think that maybe you don't know each one of these words and this, but for sure reading the newspaper, maybe also participating, you know some of them, from the co-housing, a way to put together elderly people, micro nursery at home, time banks, carpooling, car sharing, food purchasing groups, farmer market, community-based agriculture, and so on. Practically in every sector of everyday life, something has been invented in the last maybe also 20 years, and they appear, and we were discussing before this afternoon. At the beginning it is an invention, afterward you have some prototype, maybe difficult to be worked, you need to have very heroic people to make them work, and afterwards some of them entered in a mature phase in which it's not so difficult to be part of them. So all this is something that is not my own utopia. The only, let's say, choose that I've done is to put together some example that have some common denominator, but they exist. So behind each one of those terms, there are a group of people that not in the future, not in a totally different world, but today, in the present world, are being able to choose to behave differently to organize some part of their daily life in a different way. So they have been able to do it today without waiting for other big change, and also sometimes against some difficulties. Okay, so people inventing new way of living and producing. And in some way, they are also inventing and practicing new ideas of well-being. I will say more than new ideas of well-being, new ideas on well-being. And just to give an example, all of them has in common a reevaluate the quality of relationships. This is very normal, very human. What is more normal than a group of people that make a party together? But the extreme of the modern Western, mainly Western, but now a large part of the world has been and is going to be Westernized, has moved toward a hyper-individualism. Of course, I am also part of this culture, so I have my individuality. I'm not talking about a kind of holistic society where we are only bit of all losing our identity and individuality, but nevertheless, today there is some people that act to regenerate some form of relational interaction. And relational interaction are friendly interaction, are interaction that ask you something. So it's not a gift. It's not you pay the ticket and you have a relationship. A relationship has to be built. So the quality of relationship is something that is started to be not, unfortunately, not yet by everybody, but all the cases that I mentioned before are mainly based to get a result, a practical result, to move with the car, to have good food, to have some residential services, to have something practical, but having it at the same time generating kind of relationships that are evaluated as important. And the recognition that the quality of the life is largely related to the quality of relationships, because human being, when you say it is obvious, but it was not obvious in a certain idea of well-being, where well-being is a kind of huge supermarket trolley that you put everything inside, and this is the quantity of what you can have in your basket is the measure of the quality of your life. The quality of your life is largely related to the quality of the relationships with the people. Very normal, very human, nothing strange, but totally different from the normal way that has been mainstream idea of what is well-being until now. The quality of space, and specifically the public space. Now, Adelaide, I think, is a place where there is a community, where there is it's relatively safe. I imagine that people can move around whatever hour in the day, so maybe here is not a problem, but I am sure that you go around in the world, that you have seen the movie. There are, most of the places now are places that are sometimes very dangerous, and where they are not dangerous, the space has been privatized. So the public space has been in the tradition of the city. In some way, tradition of the city was the place where there are public space, the piazza, the streets, the place where people can stay, can interact, where things can happen, but in a relatively safe condition. Well, the public space seems to be disappearing in the mainstream. And we have, in those cases, a lot of cases where people try to reconquire and generate public space where it was not foreseen. But when in the past, the public space in the cities were a kind of, inverted comma, natural thing. It was not natural because it was human, but it happens without necessity to do something to create the public space. The public space existed. Now the new public space, as the new community, the new relationship that we said before, has to be in some way built. Something has to be done. If you don't do anything, the public space disappears. And public space is a large part of the quality of the life. It's enough to go in a place where this notion of public space do not exist to understand what is the fear that you have of the city. that you need to move from one shopping center to another closed place to feel safe. So the idea in Europe, for instance, now the idea of fear is one of the most terrible things that are happening. Entire region where people have never had fear, at least in the last century. No, but it's complicated because we had a lot of war, let's say, in the last decades. But normally, the place was felt as a place of the community. And now the places are felt as a place that are dangerous. And this feeling of danger is terrible socially, as you can imagine. So the rebuilding of the perception of being in a safe place is very linked to the quality of space. It's very linked to the regeneration of public space. So how much public space is important in the perception of the quality of the life? And the quality of time. The quality of the time in the modernity is, by definition, the time is something that's moved very fast, accelerated. The speed has been one of the key word of modernity. Well, modernity has been invented as an idea, as a vision, especially in some artist movement, as the futurist. There was really the idea of speed. And in some way, this idea generates a certain way of conceiving the life, a certain anxiety of filling all your time of something to do or maybe two things to do together. Well, a lot of these cases propose a kind of slowdown in the pace of your life. This do not mean that you have to make everything slow and sleepy, as in some provincial town of the past, but at least to evaluate the quality of what we can call a kind of ecology of the time. So you can have some time that is more speedy, but also some moment you take the time. And take the time is more or less equal to evaluate the quality. The quality, the idea of quality is a social construction, but quality, to build, to generate quality and to appreciate quality, it takes time. You have glasses of wine. The wine is a good example. To make a good wine, it takes time. You cannot make wine in the same way that you produce an industrial product that can be tun, 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 tun. If you have a good machine, you can make it hundreds of thousands of pieces an hour. Wine is wine. It takes time. A good one. Afterward, many of them is not good. But I will say also to appreciate the good wine takes time. If you don't know anything of wine, you don't understand which is good and which is not. So to have the quality, I say wine because I see the glasses in your hand, but to say if you want to have the quality, you want to perceive the quality of you have in your hand, it asks for time. It cannot be done in a different way, not produce it and not consume it. And the recognition that something asks for a different speed in your time is something that is emerging from these cases. And look, when you put together a different idea of relationships, a different idea of space, a different idea of time, you change not only, it's not a vague, it's not a fashion, it's not a shallow something. These are the pillars on which a civilization is based. So if this change, if there are a group of people that rediscuss the quality of relationships, the quality of space, and the quality of time, these people are discussing the deep value of an entire civilization. And this has to be understood because it's very important. And also there is a last point that is very important. That is, all these cases ask for people to be active. I would say they are happy to do it, so to be happily active. And the whole idea of well-being that the modern last century society and culture has generated considered people happy when they have not to be engaged, when they do not have to do anything. So there was good reason. Now it will be too long to discuss in depth each one of these points, but in some way facing a society that was really with the heaviness of working in the field or working in the factory, well-being was to sit in a chair and being in some way served, not to be engaged physically, mentally, not to have to do anything, and so on and so forth. But human beings like also to be engaged. Human beings like also to act and to show to themselves and to the other that they are able to do something. So if the people that are engaged in organizing themselves to solve the problem of the food, to solve the problem of the elderly, to solve the problem of the welfare, if it's done in the right way, if people like to do it, they like the possibility to be capable. And the idea to be capable is very important because you move from an idea of well-being that was a kind of passive gift that you have. In the best of the idea, you are sitting there as somebody offers you as a kind of gift, this is your well-being, and you open your package and you have your well-being. The new well-being is a construction. So people have to be active to generate the condition for their well-being. And the profile, when we talk about people, is totally different. If you imagine that to please the people, you have to orient yourself toward the lazy side of the people. Everybody is also lazy. I'm very lazy. I like to be served sometimes. But we are also active. And afterward, 1 century, where all the idea of well-being was toward the lazy side, I offer you a way to be sitting on your chair and not doing anything, only enjoy what I'm giving to you, toward the one I want to challenge you, I want to offer you the possibility to do things, to create relationship, to create your space, to create your reality. Well, this is a huge change. Okay. What these promising cases with these different ideas of quality are telling us? First of all, if we are searching for sustainability, so for a sustainable society, and if we hope to move towards a sustainable society by choice, and not obliged by catastrophes or by some kind of green dictatorship that obliges to do the things that is necessary to be done, it means that people have to like it. And so they move from a certain idea of the quality to another idea of the quality. What these cases tell us is that today a certain number of people, no matter how many they are, but they exist, they are physical, real people, have found a way to perceive a new kind of quality that in some way equilibrate or balance the reduction in a certain kind of consumption for the improvement of something else. So one of the difficulties when we talk about what we should do to move towards sustainability is that in some way we have to leave all the set of products that we have today, not because we will not have chairs, cars, lamps, and the washing machine, but simply because if you move from there, you will never arrive to something that is better, because you should say, yes, there will be washing machine, but less. Yes, there will be car, but less. So you only talk about something that is similar to the present world, but with less something. And nobody can go towards something less if you don't see any advantage. Deep advantage maybe is not the right term, but you understood. So you have to show something different. And it's really different. So the issue is, for instance, just to quote what I said before, quality of relationships, quality of the space, public space, quality of the time, quality of your capability to be active. This is the first. The second is, okay, but if you say that, how you can promote it? What you can do? At the end, I am a designer, I design products, services, and systems, and the company has to work. So how we can imagine a all practical, technical infrastructure that instead of promoting the kind of idea of qualities that you have seen until now, promote the kind of qualities that in some way appear through this social innovation that we have seen. So this is the challenge. It's possible to imagine a new kind of structure that make an economy and produce what is needed to make this kind of quality more probable than the ones that we have until now. And also the economic model, of course, in some way I anticipated. This is both shows that there could be different qualities, and in some way they show that it could be also a different economy. Now I don't have the time to go in depth in this, but each one of these cases, the cases that I mentioned before, they are very little, but they are extremely complex in terms of business model. They are business model also. If they exist, it means that there is an economy that makes them exist and last in time. But if you try to understand how they work with the traditional economical tools, it's very, very difficult. So at least you have to move from the traditional economy toward what somebody call the social economy. You can search, there is a beautiful booklet, you can read it in 2 hours, that is related to the social economy by Mr. Murray, that can be downloaded. Explained very well that at least you have to move from the traditional idea of what is economical, that until now has been more or less the same, say, the market economy, towards something that do not deny the quality of the market, but see that the economy is more complex. It's not only the market economy, but there are, again, a kind of ecology of economies. I will use so frequently this term ecology of something because one of the most ecological issues that we can do, or one of the less ecological issues that we can do, is to generalize. So when we decide that the economy was only the market economy, the problem was not the market economy. The problem was to think that everything could be solved by the market economy. And the social economy is a way to look that you have the market economy, the economy of the state, the economy of the grant, what Murray called the household economy, that generally speaking means whatever you do outside from the monetary economy because you like to do it, because you do it as a gift, etc., etc. So this is another lecture that maybe can done somebody else also better than me, but for sure better than me. But it's important to understand that each one of them has an economical model. Afterward, of course, somebody can say, yes, but how you can imagine that this new economy can compete with the big corporation, the worldwide entity? Of course, nobody knows. But I would say that even the people of the World Bank do not know how to solve the big problems. So I don't know why, if they do not know how to solve the big problems, how we that we are trying to work on the alternative should have right now the overall picture. We do not need to have the overall picture to recognize something that is valuable, that could be concrete, and that can start to work and to generate the precondition, hopefully, to the larger change. And here we arrive to the bridge toward the scenario. I don't know if with this audience I imagine that more or less you agree with the basic of what I'm saying. So maybe I tell it with different words, but if you are here, I suppose that you are not totally against. So we could agree that all this is interesting. and agree that is doing something that could be very original. The issue is, it is important simply because it shows sociologically an interesting phenomenon, little group of people doing something interesting, or they are not only a little group of people, but they are the beginning of a new paradigm. So for sure, it's a minority. But as you know, even the bigger things, at a certain moment, they were minorities. So the fact that they are minorities do not mean that they have to be minorities in the future. So here is the challenge, and in some way, luckily the future is not given, so we don't know what will happen. But we know that the future is largely done by what we do. So my design statement is, I don't know if these cases are really minority, or they are seed of possible larger future, but I bet on the fact that they could be the seed of a possible larger future. And given that I am a designer, I am obliged when I say something not only to say what is a wish. That can be done. A writer can write something because he likes it, or somebody else can say something because ethically is correct, and they say this is ethically correct. As a designer, I have to say, the future is not given, but in the present there are some potentiality. The potentiality have some basis, and I have to try to show that this hypothesis, so the hypothesis that this idea of qualities and this idea of economy is the seed of something bigger, because there are some potential driver that could bring in that direction. And this is what I'm going to do. First of all, they are very little. In some way, I think also here, but around the world, they are little, but nowadays they are less little than in the past. So they are still minority, but they moved from being a really, really tiny minority towards something that start to have a certain dimension. I always quote the example of the food and agriculture. The food agriculture, many, many little things that today start to create the vision of a system of food of agriculture that is still minority, but is not so minority as it was 20 years ago. But in my view, we can look how these ideas are related to some deep trends. The trends are transformation in society that are so big that in some way they became a kind of quasi-natural event. So normally, who deal with scenario in future do not discuss the trend. So the trend are there, they can change somewhere the meaning, but you cannot imagine really to totally divert them because they are too large. And I think that nowadays, as I was saying at the beginning, the issue about the green economy is a trend. Maybe given that now it's really business, it's less rosy than I could imagine 20 years ago. But this, in some way, is a good story. It means that when things become real, on the real thing, you have the real competition, you have the real business, etc., etc. So just to give an example, I personally have no doubt that in between the China and the United States, and maybe Europe, but unfortunately at this moment Europe is a little bit in a bad shape. I would like to say also Europe, but at least in between China and the United States, there is a competition who will be the winner and the leading in the green economy. And the both has a lot of possibility, and the Chinese in particular, in my view, will be the winner, because they have the internal market to do what they want. So if they choose to move in this direction, they will do it. And the green economy, for me, it's a synthetic term that now, or the green revolution, has been chosen. And but I want to underline some character. The green solutions are mainly local solutions. So if you want to really to use at best the environmental resources, you have to look at the local scale. the renewable resources are, of course, you can have also huge solar plant in the Sahara Desert, but this is not the best way to use the renewable resources. And if you want to organize industrial ecology, that means to create a cycle in between different kind of industry where one take the waste of the others and create a kind of closed cycle with zero waste result, they have to be nearby. So again, they have to be localized. You cannot have an industrial ecology with one industry in China and the other one in Australia and the third one in Europe. Every time that you want to use at best some territorial resources, you have to look to the territory. So the green economy is now a trend that I think will not change and will be the trend of this century. It could be treated in a different ways, also at a very global scale, but if you look a little bit to, not to the ethical principle thing, but how they work, they are mainly local. The second one is the diffusion of information communication technology, network, etc. So the networked organization. Also this one, of course, if a major catastrophe happens, maybe it will not be like this, but I think that if nothing else happens, the diffusion of the network will be more and more. And already now we start to see what are the implications of a society and a form of organization, mainly hierarchical. Again, for very practical reason, if you wanted to manage something big, you had to organize a hierarchical organization toward flat, networked organizations. For the good or for the bad. Also, Al-Qaeda is a networked organization. It's not said that a networked organization are only for the good. They could be also for the bad. But it's very interesting to see how much they change the structure of the organizations, generating forms of organization that were unconceivable, and related to this form of organization also form of behavior that was unconceivable, and also economy. There is this term that I don't know if you are familiar with, it is the wikinomics, that are all the form of organization that happens because the connectivity exists. And it's very important because wikinomics is very successful and is totally against the normal idea of economy. So at least not only they are important per se, but they show in a crystal clear way that there was not only one way of thinking the economy. Because before the wikinomics, everybody said, yes, but this is the economy, the idea, what you can do. The economy is this one. And at once you have that Linux is able to compete with Microsoft, and is something started in a thesis of a student in Norway. So something is changing, for the good, for the bad, but it's really deeply changing. So the trend is this one. Of course, we have to try to bring it in the right condition. But again, what is a common denominator of this trend are the net. And the net is something which the notion of what is big and what is small changed totally. Because before connectivity, the little was little, and when we talk about something big, it meant something that became big in dimensions. In the network, the small is not small, because the small can be the node of a net, and the dimensions are related more to the density of the links than to the dimensions of the elements. So when you think to the future, your idea of what is big and what is little has to be changed. Because in the networks, what is big and what is little change. This computer, when it's isolated, is small. When it's connected to the net, is small or is big. It depends. It's part of a net. It's a different logic. Again, the key words are small and connected. And after the social innovation that I referred to very quickly before, but it generates form of organizations that are this kind of collaborative service, a prototype of sustainable way of living. So what I was saying before, again, if you move from this word to the images, images are images of communities, groups, in any case, something that is not the huge metropolis, something that is group of people. So if we, until now, these three discussions have been done in different arenas. So normally who discuss about the green economy is not so linked to who discuss about networked society and to the social innovation. Each one of them has their own arena of discussion. But we live in the same world. So at a certain point, they will converge. So we can start to imagine something that emerge at the intersection of these three main area of transformation. And I want to say that the small story that I was presenting at the beginning is coherent with these deep trends. So this, I put it together because afterward I talked of big story, universal change, etc., etc. But at the end, we can find very simple little stories that could be, in this case, I will not say that the trend will bring this kind of story as obvious, but they make it possible. And this is interesting because, of course, we have something to do with the green economy because they eat organic food produced in a certain way, etc., etc. They are connected because this kind of community-supported agriculture is also based on some digital platform. And they create kind of links that was not so obvious before. So in some way, they innovated this kind of direct demediated the relationship in between the country, the farmer, and the citizen was not so obvious nowadays. So there is a social innovation also by this point of view. And I already anticipate there are some keywords that appear in the huge story of the big trends and appear also in the little story of everyday life. And one is small. So the quality of something that has a certain dimension. The other is local. So what happened not in a kind of generic, not better defined space, but it happened somewhere, so you cannot talk about them without putting them in a precise place with a name. They are open. It means that it's not a closed community, it's not a closed entity, but it's an entity that exchanges something with others and is connected. That is what makes, in some way, practically working all those three. And here we are to the title of my scenario. So I think that what starts to appear is a scenario, and this scenario means not a utopia, means not a dream, means something that could have some element of a dream, but based on some possibility. That is a scenario of the small, local, open, and connected. I think that, well, I gave as known what is the meaning of the term scenario. The meaning of the term scenario is to generate a narrative that permit to many different actions to move in the same direction. So when we move into the complexity, as we are now, we can imagine that many different persons, many different groups, many different activity are doing something, and thanks God, they are not working in the same planning as it was in the Soviet Union and show that it could not work. So somebody that imagined to put hundreds of millions of people in the same scheme to move in the same direction. So if you want to hope to maintain a kind of capability to orient what is happening in the complexity, you have to imagine that there are social resources moving in different way, and at a certain point some idea appear and help hundreds of thousands, millions of people to make their own free choice, but maybe choosing something that moves in the same direction. So we need desperately scenarios, because if we don't have scenarios, what happens is that only the mainstream goes on. So to move in another direction, we need scenario. Here, I will not say that the one that I'm proposing you now is for sure 100% the scenario that we need. I think that also to generate the scenario, a kind of strategic conversation in between different groups in society has to happen. But in my view, it's difficult to say that a sustainable society would not be based on something that in some way is small, something in some way is local, something that is in some way open and connected. But now I want to discuss a little bit, because everything, has to be understood a little bit better. Where is the lady that has to wave me when I finish my time? I lost Erin. You are the waiver. Yes, thank you. 10 minutes. So the most normal way to look at these words is connected in the way that I say, to the small and the local together, and the connected and the open together. And this is a very normal, nowadays, normal discussion. Because, of course, the small and the local goes very well together, because there is an issue of scale. So at the scale, you recognize something. At the scale, you think that you have the possibility to take decision. At the small scale, you think that you can find the real roots of your identity. So normally when people talk about being in control of my situation, think to something that is at a human scale, and the human scale cannot be so big. And there are a lot of discussion about how, maybe you know, how many links with people we can have. There's somebody said no more than 150, for instance. And so there are some theory on that, how many relationships we have to have, and also our physical body is in a certain space, and a certain space has a certain possibility to interact. So strange, not strange, now it's not strange, but some years ago it appeared strange that the more that the globalization spread and became strong, the more people started to recognize in a reflexive way the importance of the locality and the importance of a certain scale. So in some way today, after some decades of globalization, we can say that the idea of locality is one result of the globalization. But, there is a but, this small and local is not necessarily so good. Unfortunately, in Europe, and in my country in particular, there is a whole movement that is, by the way, unfortunately very powerful, that use this idea of small and local to push toward a direction that is at least xenophobic, if not definitely racist, for sure very egoistic. So there is a way to interpret locality and identity in a way that try to exclude the others. And this is ethically, you can judge it, but politically it's terrible. And in society, much more mixed than yours. Here you're still sufficient, no, but you are not homogeneous because you come from every part in the world, but once that you are Australian, you are relatively homogeneous. Europe now is really in a very bad shape for many reasons, but the main reason is the problem of facing different culture, facing different people arriving. And so there, in some way, the success of some party that move from locality and identity, the identity of the locality, to move toward what for me is unacceptable position, shows two things. One is that it's really true that human being needs in some way to be local, because if somebody proposes them in a very simple way, they are being very successful, and at the same time, the risk of this position. And Also, the open and connected very frequently is together, because open and connected is the world of who is talking about virtual reality, the new world, the world of flow, the world in which you don't have any relationship with the locality. And of course, there are a lot of positive, potentially positive things in this connection in between open and connected. And it's the new kind of world that has been discussed in the last 30 years when the information and communication technology appear. But it could also, this one, be dangerous, because the tendency, now I make it extreme, is that you spend your life in a kind of virtual reality, forgetting that you are also a physical body living in a physical space and having some physical need, not only the practical one, but also the psychological one. So this kind of connection, the local with the small and the open and the connected, are interesting, are here, very concrete, very strong also in this case, in some way also dangerous. For this, I think that it's very interesting to consider this other possible connection. This one is not so obvious because it was not possible until a few years ago. And it's interesting because if you connect, you put together the small and the connected, you have what I said before. You have a small that is not only small. So somebody in between you maybe recalls Small is Beautiful of Schumacher. You know it? Somebody you know it? Well, it was written maybe 40 years ago, and it was a beautiful book, and it still is a beautiful book. But if you read it today, you can agree on the 90% of the good things that is said, but the remaining 10% is what makes that book really old. Because at the time of Schumacher, the small was really only small. There was no possibility to connect it as it is today. And so the possibility to go back to the, to move towards the small was to go back in the history toward the villages. And this is something that is anti-historical. Human beings never go back to the past. This is the only future that we, for sure, we cannot imagine is to go back to the past. Now, the small is beautiful because it's connected, in my view. And so it could be at the same time contemporary and have the quality of the opportunity of something that is at the scale the human being can control, the community can control. And this is something that is very important. And the same, in some way, is true also for the local, because the old village, not only it could be dangerous for the reason that I said before, but also, frankly speaking, I don't know you, but at least myself, I will not, so I am a contemporary person. I will not live in a closed village without connections. But now you can be in a village and being connected with everybody. So there is this possibility to have the open, and the openness is what try to avoid the risk that the community close in themselves and became a kind of cage in which people separate themselves from the others. And this is why, in my view, the four keywords have to be considered together. So they are, all of them are important, but they became particularly important, and particularly, in my view, a potential positive scenario only if we consider them as a whole. To articulate this scenario, and I have to go toward the end of my presentation, there are two major ways of talking about this scenario. That is the same scenario, but seen by two different points of view, using two terminology that are used, especially in Australia. There are a whole group of people that are talking about distributed system. And if you look by the point of view of the community society, we can talk about Cosmopolitan localism, this is a terminology that I like a lot. So it's a localism but open, as a cosmopolitan can give. And distributed system is the technical infrastructure that could make this cosmopolitan localism possible. So again, sorry if I repeat it, when I talk about a scenario, it's not only a dream. It's a dream to think that it will be really like this, but there are some possibilities. And the distributed system as infrastructure for this scenario is something that is here and is very near. There is only a problem of politics, of choice. It's not that we have to wait the maturity of the nanotechnology to make it. We can do it with the technology that we have today are more than enough to make it possible. The cosmopolitan localism is that the community are connected. Now, I'm very short to go to the end, and at the same time that they are open. That, in my view, is one coming from a country where a party that goes Lega has been so successful, saying that the foreign people are our enemy. This is really a fundamental point. And the distributed system, I think that some of you know, because as I said, everywhere, but particularly here, there are my friends from Melbourne in particular that I know, the Veil organization that is moving on this, means to think that all the infrastructure, for technical reason, not because they were particularly bad, but until a few years ago, the only possibility to organize a huge infrastructure was to make it hierarchical, as the electrical grid, big power central, etc., etc. Now there is the possibility to create new form of infrastructure that are more networked, more horizontal, with many nodes that are more or less equal potential. And what is interesting is if you look here, you see that the issue of distributed is an adjective that means what I said before. And if you look at the first one, the distributed computing is history now. People do not think of that, but I am old enough to remember when the computing was hierarchical, with a big mainframe and the information that flow from this center. Nowadays, it's obvious that we are in a network of computer. It's very possible to have distributed power generation. All the technology out there is enough to rethink them. And you, especially in Australia, there is a huge discussion about water. You are, I think, the most advanced country that I know in the world around the issue of water. And the discussion is to move from a hierarchical water system toward a networked water system. And it's only an issue of choice. I will not say that it's simple, but there is nothing to invent. It's only to do it. There are the possibility of reimagining the global production in a way that is a distributed production. That means in the line with the lean manufacturing that move toward customization and just in time, you can move to on the spot. So not only you produce for you, not only you produce for you when you ask it, but you produce for you very near to where you are. And this is not only good for the environment and society, but it's very good also in terms of a flexible system, because if I produce very near to you, I reduce transportation, I make all the system more flexible. And altogether, this could generate a distributed economy. That is an economy where everything is connected, but you try to maintain the most of the value in the same region until you can. And probably you know it, but there are so many reasons for that. And to make it clear, for sure you know why internet exists. Well, if only one of you do not know, internet exists because the military was very worried about the fact of having a hierarchical system in the information, because the hierarchical systems are very fragile. If you hit the center, everything collapses. So internet has been designed to create a resilient system. If this is true for information, it's true for everything. So if we are moving toward a risky world, and this unfortunately we cannot avoid it, If we are wise, we should organize all our technical system on which we depend to systems that are the most resilient that is possible. And the most resilient that is possible, it means in a network way. Because in a network way, you can have failure, but the redundancy of the system makes that they resist, they do not collapse. And the risk management should be the first motivation. The economy, because you have more lean economies, more flexible, more adaptable economy. The ecology, because you use better resources. The real democracy, because if you imagine a future of big centralized system, they become so complex that nobody can really take decisions. So they tell you, oh, this is too complicated. Some very technical one has to take the decision. When if you bring the production of energy, information, and product nearer to the community can have voice. And equity, because this is a way also to reimagine what is the possibility of development in the non-developed countries. And, well, maybe we can finish here. Is it this possible? In my view, yes. We have not to wait to any technological miracles. Not that we don't need the technology, but we have so many technologies in the last decades that simply using those technology, we can do 100% of everything I've said now. But of course, there is a mentality that has to be rethought, reorganized. And the guideline for me at this level is to keep the maximum of the knowledge, power, and economical value, the more near to who produces it. That do not mean autarkic group totally isolated. Simply means in this network, the globally networked society, you can create centers that are interconnected, but they generate it. And this is very important for us because it's not anti-global position, this one. It's only, I would say, for a joke, a more intelligent globalization, because it's a globalization in which you can circulate the ideas, but you try to maintain the knowledge, the money, and the power on the spot. And this, maybe I will finish with this, because for me it's a very crucial point. In this moment, maybe you know, there is a huge discussion about, I quote, how to make money with the poor. That means a possibility to develop is to bring the market and to bring a certain kind of economy, even in the poor, because you can make a lot of money with 1 cent for billion of people, maybe better than selling $1 for 1 million of people. But this is the way is how you enter. So the most of this proposal on how to make money with the poor, or it's a kind of pump, they suck the last cent that they have and they bring it to a kind of center. This distributed system could permit what? So if you want to judge a proposal that moves toward the poor countries, the poor community, you have to ask yourself, who has the knowledge? Who has the power? And how much money remain in the circle? So a solution that maintain the local knowledge, maintain locally the power, and maintain, not all, but the majority of the money locally, probably this is a distributed system, and probably this is the possible infrastructure for a sustainable society, both by the point of view of the environment and by the point of view of the social relationship. And we need a lot of action, because as I said, nothing is so difficult. So there are no basic research. No, we need basic research for something else, but not to do what I said until now. We need an applied research. We need an action research. So we need things to learn from what we need, from what you do, and to move and to make things better, because of course, there are a lot of problems, but it's not something that has to be projected in a very far future. It's something that should be done today, and in some way is happening today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezio, and I'm sure you'll agree there's a lot of food for thought there. We did call these the dialogues, and this is the dialogue part. There's a couple of roving mics around. If you'd like to raise your hand, if you feel like identifying yourself and where you're from, that's fine. But does anyone have any questions? Down the front here, Jane. Oh yes, we had an issue with the Australian dialect. Just keep talking, Jane.
Okay, I'm really interested in the areas where you touch on notions of value. And within communities, we have very differing notions of value and how we measure them. You discussed keeping notions of value close to where production is, but the thing that I'd like you to comment on is policy and politics are so closely related, and they are also about space, place and locality. Who determines what the value is? Is it intrinsic? Is it instrumental? Is it institutional value? Or is it all three of those things? And how do we enable a balance of those types of values within our communities to keep them sustainable?
Use the microphone because we're videoing.
Yeah.
It's a complicated question, sorry.
There is somebody that wants to answer this question? No, I can say something, of course. I'm here to say something, but maybe it could be more alive if one question, maybe there is also somebody else on the same subject. So it's not good to have other questions on totally different. But if on this there are some other opinion or maybe some answer, I think that is better.
Yeah,
no?
no problems. There's a question up top.
Professor, I'd like to take issue with your final proposition. Your main idea, as you say, is to keep more knowledge, power and economic value in the place where they've been produced. But doesn't that conflict directly with your idea of being open and connected?
Yeah, but okay. I will answer to this, but this is not exactly on the same.
So I'll paraphrase. Who mediates the notion of value within the economy?
Yeah.
Is it social value? Is it?
No, with this ad, I'm not sure that I have understood. Before I was thinking values, not only the economical ones.
Absolutely.
Now you say also the economical values.
Well, economics is, I guess, homogenise the notion of value, but there are other forms of value that we perhaps we can't measure as easily, like the intrinsic value of something. And so, unfortunately, you know, if you have
What are the intrinsic values?
how we feel, how it makes us feel, how going and buying goods from a local produce market makes
Yeah.
us feel.
But
Trust and all those sorts of social issues.
yeah, so I go back to your question afterwards. No, because they are different. Now I was thinking something on this point. But if there are nobody else that want to intervene on this point,
Could I make a suggestion?
yeah,
Value is as perceived by the recipients. So really it's going to be your community that's going to determine whether something is of real value to itself. You've talked about ways of generating value, but the judges are going to be your local communities.
yes. This is the first answer is that the value are subjective. And the value are subjective, but given that we are social animals, our value are always the result of a conversation. And the conversation is, first of all, with who is nearest to you. So if you are part of a community, your value probably are shared with the community that you are part. afterward, I think, but I think that this is not only very personal opinion, could be that the whole society, through the individuals and through the community, is involved in a larger social conversation, and in time generate some kind of basic value that different people with different interpretation, but create a kind of common denominator that generate the generally recognized value of a certain region or a certain period. In my view, in my understanding, what happened in the past is that this kind of basic value evolved. Of course, they evolved. So they are human constructions, so they change it. But they change it very slowly. And the confrontation in between different society with different values or was very long in time, or there was a conflict with war and slavery and whatever. Now everything moved more fast, and so the generation of value can be helped. And before I was mentioning the idea of speed in modernity. Well, at least in my knowledge of the history of culture, a major role has been played by a movement that has been the futurist, the European futurist, especially Italian futurist. They create a vocabulary to talk about the new age. So the age until that moment, the age of modernization, the age of mechanism, had some basic driver, also some cultural driver, but who really generate popular, gave to people an imaginary, has been the futurist. And also today we have had very influential images that arrived and generate common shared perception of value. I think that the transition towards sustainability has to promote a very huge social discussion that has to be fed with ideas. The ideas will compete, and some common, hopefully some common idea will appear. And I don't see any other possibility to move in a peaceful way and in a soft way towards sustainability if some basic idea will not be sufficiently spread. Because otherwise only a catastrophe can change the mentality. So something has to happen. So this is the basic of my thought. Given this idea of the social conversation is also not such a concern for me, a total coherence. So it's not needed to have the total vision where every pieces perfectly combine themselves, because in any case, we are not planning the future that correspond to our scenario. The scenario is not, I can say, the drawing that afterward the future will be done following that drawing, as an engineer could imagine. The scenario is food for conversation. So afterward, what really will happen, luckily nobody knows. But hopefully it will be built from the ideas and the proposal that we are able to generate today. So at least this is not only mine, but this is mine and other philosophy on how the future is built. So the future is unknown. But whatever it will be built with the material that we prepare today. So if you prepare good bricks, you have some hope that the future will be built with these good bricks. And I don't know if this is the answer to your question, but it's my attempt. And for the economical issue, the same. When we had the Industrial Revolution, at the beginning of the story in the feudal society, you had, at least from the 13th century toward the 18th century, island of cities and places and regions that were outside the main feudal, sorry, I am always talking about Europe, but it's a story that I know better. So they was different way of doing, thinking and doing inside a feudal framework. At that point, nobody could imagine the industrial society. And what they could do is not to have to stop and think until we have the overall picture. They simply, in that case, without thinking, move a lot and create something that at a certain point arrived at the tipping point. And this is, in my knowledge of the complex system, the way in which the complex system evolved. They evolved because the frame remained the same and tried to resist. Internally, something happened, and at a certain point that cannot be foreseen, the frame break, and you have a big fluctuation, is English? Big fluctuation, and the big fluctuation will utilize what was inside and generate something that will be new, but using what was inside. So if this happened for the Industrial Revolution, it should happen also for sustainability, and maybe also bigger, because the change from feudal to industrial society, in my view, in some way is less big than from unsustainable modernity to a sustainable modernity. So I think that we have to try to do our best to be coherent, to create something that works, but without being overwhelmed by the responsibility of being able to give answer to everything. Because, I repeat, also the one that try to maintain, to fix the past, as I say, we are building the future, some other fix the past. Who is trying to fix the past, do not have an idea of how they could really fix it, because you can think, okay, we have to produce more cars, because if you don't do cars, there are people unemployed, so give money to the car manufacturers and so and so. Okay, maybe it has to be done. But if you ask them, but what people will do of all these cars? Nobody knows. And so there is no answer. There is only to say, okay, we have to have some jobs, afterwards we lose the jobs, and so on and so forth.
May I suggest that you could also use the Reformation as a model of change?
Reformation, reforms means?
Yeah, the Reformation in Europe.
Lutheran Reformation, the Church Reformation.
Yeah, but as you know, the Reformation has been one of the pillars in the radical transformation, the move from feudal toward the modern society. So this one has been a very huge driver, not the only one, but a very important one that created the cultural condition for the transformation. But he was asking how I could put together the issue about locality and the issue about to be global. Maybe I am naive, but in my view, we can use a metaphor of my computer. I do in my computer everything that I can do in my computer, and when I don't know something, it's not there, I can connect to the net and have what I need. So I think that it has to be invented, of course, but it's not impossible to imagine how to try to maintain both some economical value inside the system, the more that is possible, and how to connect with the others. And for the production, for instance, the issue about food and the tendency toward a zero-mile food is one of the more concrete examples that the system can also evolve in this direction. But when I'm talking with the designers, I always say all the system of products could be redesigned in order to make them producible the more near to the place where they were used. And this do not mean that if you had to make a TV set, you had to produce one flat screen in every village, of course. But you can, just to give you an idea, every product can be divided in a kind of dense high-tech core and other parts that can be produced in more or less everything, everywhere. So it could be imagined that, for instance, a refrigerator, you could have a kind of core of electronics that is done maybe in 2 factories in the world, and afterward maybe also a dense condensator, how you call it, the machinery, but the remaining part, why you have to ship around the world something that at the end is only air and a plastic that you can find everywhere. And in this way, a little bit the same thing that IKEA did. What IKEA did is not exactly the same, but just to give you an idea, they decided that everything should be packaged and with the possibility to be bring at home by the person and built by the person. And so they still design a chair, table, scaffold, etc., but they changed the way in which they are done to make it possible for people to build them, to bring at home and build at home. So what could be to redesign the whole system of product in a way that you can produce something in some places and afterward having the possibility to build them at home. So, or what is the possibility of craftsmanship? The majority of the world is still doing craftsmanship. Are they going to disappear? And if they disappear, what will happen to all these people? Or there is a possibility to reevaluate, to integrate the traditional craftsmanship with some contemporary potentiality and create a kind of connected craftsmanship. So these are all programs that do not ask for new magic technology. They only ask for brain and capability of design capability, if you want.
Conscious of time, we will take 2 more questions and then 3 more questions, but we'll take them all together and then Ezio can wrap them up. So starting with you, sir.
Just a comment on...
But we need money to survive.
Okay, 4 very deep questions, each of which I'm sure Ezio could talk for at least half an hour. I'm going to try and give you a 20-word question that summarises those, which is, and forgive me if I take some of the rough edges off, but can social innovation reinvent the new economy given the vested interests and the sunk costs?
I prefer to answer following another order because it became a little bit simple. No, the first one is the gentleman the simple question answer is I am a designer, and so I have to be an optimist. So I have to bet on the possibilities. This do not mean that the possibilities are for sure 100% or 70%, but I don't see other possibilities. So I try to see something that could be possible, in my view, and work on that. Hopefully finding some motivation, some basis on which to do it. So at least I feel it's not a dream and a utopia, but I am not saying how many possibilities there are that things goes in this direction. I only say that they can go in this direction, and a lot depends on what people do. But the second is that when the big system collapses, you can never say the day before. A very typical example has been the collapse of the Soviet Union. The day before the collapse of the Soviet Union, no one, even in the CIA, and even in all these agencies that was working a lot to understand what will be happening in the Soviet Union, understood that that was the tipping point in which what happened inside, the stress from outside, may cause the system implode. I don't know, in the case of Russia, imploded, and the BRICS for the future was not so good, so at the end the result is not so fantastic. So it imploded, it had a kind of an evolution, and the result, they used the mafia that they had inside, and unfortunately the result is not so fantastic. But nevertheless, it shows how the complex system can change. So the fact that now we have this huge system do not mean that they are eternal. And unfortunately, even if they collapse, it's not say that the final result will be better. So it's not that if we have only to wait the moment in which they collapse. The only thing that we can do, in my view, is to prepare building blocks for the future that permit that when this kind of crisis will happen, there could be something else. And this something else is also preparing this change and hopefully preparing in a way that could also be not so tragic for the people. And this comes from my, not only for some experience, but also there's a theory of the evolution of the complex system that shows in some way how the complex system, not only the social one, but also the natural one, change. If you are interested afterward, I can give you some reference. So I understand what you say, but I think that we have not to be paralyzed by what appear as a disproportion in between our energies. If you want, it's a little example, but it's as we say, the Mr. Linus, when he started to organize his software, was very, very little in relation to Microsoft, but nevertheless something happened. So then now it's competing to the other. So in my view it is possible, and there are some signals that make me think that the social conversation is starting to generate some common trend, because you find exactly the same basic idea everywhere in the world in this moment. Everywhere. So I don't see any other thing to propose, so this is what I propose, even if I know that. The value of use versus the exchange value. I often say that all the movement that we are talking about ask for a kind of, inverted comma, new Marx. So somebody that is able to generate the real theory of the new situation. And as a matter of fact, Marx make some mistake, and also the Marxists maybe made also bigger mistake, but also in some way generate a model that permit to interpret something that before was many spread movement, not so easy to be recognized. Nowadays, everywhere there are a lot of people doing very positive things, but they do not have voice. And this is only to say that I don't have, and I am also a poor designer, not an economist or something else, to answer. But again, I think that the real, more complete vision could appear after that many things happen. If nothing happen, if we wait to solve the general problems, things will be changed and we will not have done anything. At the same time, it's true that I'm not talking enough about economy. I said, please have a look to this, for instance, this booklet that is Social Economy, written by Robin Murray, and I totally agree with him. And he says that the market economy exists. By the way, the market economy in theory is also interesting because it's a way to deal with the complexity. So it's not totally, in my view, is totally bad, but it cannot solve all the problems. And following who is more expert than me, new models are appearing. And as a matter of fact, the Wikinomics exists, and it's something that you cannot understand in the normal models. And of course, now we have to go to the issue about voluntary work, etc., etc. There are also voluntary work. But I will say, maybe now I don't want to be misunderstood, but a lot of work has been done by women, traditionally for free. And maybe now we don't like that it happened like this, but at the moment everybody accepted it. So it's not said that what appeared to us the only driver for people to work and to do things has to be like this, because in the history a lot of people have done a lot of things following different models. I use the case of women work in a house for family. Then now it's a lot of the services that we buy has been done by the woman. I will not come back to that point, but I only say that it happened, that the economy has been different. Or there is all the issue of the common goods. For centuries, society have respected the common goods. In the last century, it appeared that the common goods were had to disappear because they are against the mainstream idea of economic model of people. But nowadays we are discovering the common goods. Internet is a common good. And when we discover the public space are common goods. So I think that I don't have the general theory, but I phenomenologically observe that there has been a period, maybe some decades, large part of the last century, in which that period there was only one monological direction. There was the hyper-individualization of people. And the model of people as economical person moved only by economical evaluation. Now we observe not only the remaining of the past, but something new that is appearing. They use something of the past in the new context, and that show people that move in different ways. I don't have the general theory, but this is it's true. You can see around us. So let's work on that. Let's try to understand what is better. Maybe there will be somebody that also create a more general theory than now, but the matter of fact is that exists. The ladies say, yes, but beyond the voluntary work, we need also monetary work, of course. First, in any case, now I don't want to be misunderstood also this, if you change your value, the quantity of money that you need could also be reduced. So we live in a kind of life in which we need more money to do something that asks for more money, and this is a kind of spiral that continuously grows. You can downshift and discover that you can reduce, and you can happily reduce. You will say, yes, but how the economy will work if people do not buy? I don't have the answer, but in some way the system has to reorganize. But individually, first of all, it's not said that we have to continuously, but we need something. Well, all that is related to localized economy, in principle, ask for more work. Eco-agriculture is highly productive, but in terms of production for square meter, but ask for more work. So the issue is to requalify the work and to consider that there are some work that the previous idea as disestimate, as be farmer, that could be perceived as a fantastic work. As a matter of fact, I don't remember if I said today or before, but there are new generations that start to appreciate to be farmer. Because in the new framework, to be farmer is much better than to be in an office. And so it could change. There is a beautiful book that I advise you to read about Richard Sennett, that is a very important sociologue of work, that is called L'uomo artigiano, the artisan, the craftsman.
The craftsman.
The craftsman, yes, the recent one, the last one. It's beautiful. It tells a story that is, as I would like my story will be, but they are not like him, that are not exactly what it is 100%, but he observes something that happened. And the craftsman is moved by the idea of doing things better. Not for success. The craftsmen do not sign, are not designers, do not sign, do not say, this is mine, I did it, my ego. They are pushed by the idea that something can be done well. And he recognized some trends in the society that show people that rediscover, if you want, a quality that I've not put there, that is the quality of doing things well, to have the satisfaction that you do. It's a utopia. Well, Richard Sennett is Richard Sennett. I think that he saw something that is happening. Maybe it's not the majority, but it's happening. So we really have to think that sustainability asks for a change in paradigms. So we really have to make an effort to understand and to see around if there are some signals of change in paradigm and to take the risk of betting on what subjectively we think that is better. So this is a kind of design, if you want. You see different things and you choose what you want to extract and to show. My presentation was a design choice. So I choose to show something that in some way is real, but another speaker could present the world in a totally different way. And also each one could be related to some realistic thing. I choose some way of telling the story that present it in a way that I think that could be positive and the discussion is open. I don't know if I forgot one of the questions.
I think we might have to leave it there. We could continue this dialogue until midnight, but could you please thank Ezio Manzini?